we'll get going. Oops. Let's make this. All right, perfect. And Ms. Yazdani, can you confirm, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, it's just loading on my screen here. All right, so everybody, welcome to Workshop Wednesday. It's September 23rd at noon. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Oops. Okay, great. So this workshop series is held every Wednesday except on weeks with a modified schedule, and it's an hour long from 12 to 1, and we have been able to get through a lot of Q&A at the end, which is nice. All right, today's topic is college exams / testing. And these are, this series is being put on by Ms. Yazdani at Mountain View High School and me, Laura Duran, at Los Altos High School in the College and Career Center. So today we're going to cover what are the various college exams, what is the situation for the class of 2021 and the class of 2022, and then have time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so let's start just by setting a context for this conversation. College exams and testing. Right now, it's pretty political and complicated, and it has been actually for a little while because the people that run the testing, they make a lot of money by having this testing, and it's a big business, like students buying test prep books or going to test prep companies or just paying for the exams themselves and then paying for those scores to be sent to schools. A billion-dollar industry. So whenever there's a lot of money involved, it can become political and it can become complicated. Right now, we're seeing a massive trend for the class of 2021 where colleges are either saying we are not requiring any testing for the seniors. Some are still requiring it. Some are highly wanting it, but they're not saying it's required, but they're encouraging students that have scores to submit. We'll go into that a bit more later, but I do want to acknowledge that for the juniors that might be in attendance today, the class of 2022, it's still a little uncertain. Some colleges and universities have already declared that the testing, the waiving of testing or the test optional or the test blind is going to persist moving forward. Some are saying for class of 2021 and 2022, some are saying for the next 5 years. Some institutions or systems are saying we're going to do away with it altogether. We're going to just like leave testing to the side. It's not going to be a part of our process anymore. But it varies greatly by college. And so I would like us to start this conversation by just acknowledging that none of us are able to control how colleges are going to require testing moving forward, but you can control your controllables. And what do I mean by that? You can control how much you work on your college essay. You can control how strong your relationship with your teacher is who are writing your letters of recommendation. You can control your volunteer activities, your sports activities, your extracurricular activities. I mean, I know you can't control it as far as being able to meet in person with COVID, but you can control what you do with your time. And so I would say just encouraging you, trying not to get too stressed out about the testing part of it, especially when it's really out of your hands, and focusing that energy on the things that you can put your time into. Okay, so that's the premise. And now let's go into the mindset of what is testing when testing is available. Your academic courses are preparing you for these exams. And so if there are younger students in the room that aren't seniors, just remembering that by reading, by going above and beyond in your coursework, you are preparing for these exams. So really trying to learn as much as you can. And I have not yet heard of any college in the world that only looks at test scores for admission. So there is always additional components to an application. If any college only looked at test scores, then you would see that everybody that got certain scores would get in, for example, or 100% of their freshman class would have a certain test score because they just went off those test scores and then it was a lottery for filling those positions. But what we know is that there are always students who don't get a perfect test score who are admitted, and there are students who have a perfect test score that are not admitted. And so just really remembering that even before all of this, test scores were just one component of the overall application. The other big part is having a conversation with your family. Just like the whole college process, a lot of this is very personal to your values, to your goals, and including your parents in the conversation is very important. So for some of you, okay, I just see whatever here. Be a willow, not an oak. So just trying to stay flexible and not too rigid in your plan. Maybe you've always thought it was going to go a certain way, and now it's all been kind of thrown in the air. So trying to have an idea of what is out there, have an idea of how it's been in the past, where it's going now and in the future, and then as things change, being able to stay dynamic and stay flexible in your decisions. Okay, and then if you are in an AP class, it is recommended or required in some circumstances that you should take the AP exam. There really isn't a reason not to take the exam. And if there are financial concerns, you should let us know because we can help you with a scholarship. But we don't want money to be the reason why you don't test. And it does raise a flag with colleges or universities why you would have an AP course on your transcript and then not sit for the exam. So then you would need to explain that, but it would be better just to take it. Even if you didn't get a passing score, then those exams are used to help, not to hurt. And over here, just colleges want a whole human on campus. And so that goes back to the other part of what else are you doing with your time? What else are people saying about you? And how are you moving through your world? And today, as we kind of go through this, we'll also be talking, just keep in the back of your mind that there's a timeline, that a typical timeline, and then you'll need to reevaluate as needed. And then just remembering that you have choices and to stay in your power. So you could fixate on the one college that is requiring test scores. I'll just throw the University of Florida under the bus here. Their regents have not said that they're going test optional or test blind. They're still requiring it. So if you have University of Florida at the top of your list and all you can think about is that University of Florida requires a test score, you're missing that there are thousands of other universities who are not requiring the test score, and that there's other pathways even to get to the University of Florida. But we can talk about that a little bit more as well. Okay, so now let's dive into each of the different types of college exams that we're going to cover today. That's PSAT, SAT, ACT, AP, and subject scores. I guess we should say subject exams there. Okay, so the PSAT, it's the preliminary SAT, and it's also the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. The PSAT is typically in the fall, and you can take it for the first time as a 10th grader. If you take it as a 10th grader, it's completely just informative. It's you getting practice taking a test like this. You get some information afterwards. It can show you areas of strength or maybe areas of relative weakness where you might want to do some additional work or some additional prep. But it gives you like a solid data point to go off of. There's also Khan Academy, where you can work through the questions that you missed and actually try to figure out why did you miss it, what were they looking for, and go from there. And so here's just some basic information about the PSAT. Now in the 11th grade, when you take it in the fall, that is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. For students that do exceptionally well on it, they get moved into this scholarship competition, and they are notified in the fall of their senior year. So Los Altos and Mountain View just found out the National Merit scholarships qualifying students, and now they're working towards moving into the finalist round. But that is announced in the fall of senior year based on fall of 11th grade PSAT scores. And then I also have a link, or we have a link down here where you can read more about the PSAT on the College Board website. Okay. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Ms. Yazdani can interrupt me, but I'm going to keep going for now.
There is a question in the chat,
Yep.
Laura. It says, will the PSAT still be on this year?
I figured that question would come up. as of right now, it's not being offered in October. So I'm not quite sure if they're going to move it to a later date or how they're going to accommodate for that. But what we can do is we can give you updates when we hear more. Good question. Yeah. Okay, then a lot of you have probably heard of the SAT. So the SAT is an official college exam, and the other option is ACT, which we'll get to on the next slide. They're different and they cover different things. So here's the breakdown. The SAT is 3 hours, and if you choose to do the optional essay, it's an additional 50 minutes. It covers 2 sections, math and evidence-based reading and writing. And then again, that essay is optional. It costs $46, $60 if you're taking it with the essay. Each section of the SAT is scored on a 200 to 800 point scale. Your total SAT score is the sum of each section. So the highest possible score is 1600. And the average SAT score is a 1060. So just to give you some context there. The PSAT and the SAT are both owned by College Board. And so there is some advantage if you've taken the PSAT, you kind of know you're like getting scores that might help indicate how you might do on the SAT, or it's formatted by the same people. And then for ACT, there is a pre-ACT that you can take. We don't typically offer it at our school sites, but at least I don't think so. Interrupt me if I'm wrong, Ms. Yazdani, but you can take a pre-ACT if you're thinking that you might want to take the ACT instead of the SAT. So that is an option. But the ACT is 2 hours, 55 minutes, and then 40 additional minutes if you take the optional essay. And then it has 4 mandatory multiple choice sections, which are always presented in the same order. You have English, math, reading, and science. And then that writing section again. The highest possible score on the ACT is a 36, and the current average ACT score is a 21. And so with the SAT or the ACT, some students, and again, in discussion with your family and what you decide to do, some students in the past would take both the SAT and the ACT, get the scores back, see which one they did better on or which format they liked better, and then do additional prep to retest in either the SAT or the ACT. Now, some students are just saying, I know I'm going to take the SAT, I'm going to stick with that. Other students are saying, I know I want to take the ACT and I'm going to stick with that. But if you're not sure, in the past, it's been typical to maybe take one of each if you have the time and the energy, and then prep for one moving forward and then stick on that path. Okay, so for AP exams, APs are taken every May, and there's a calendar, so they're set. And again, this should be something that you register for now. I've seen that in the student announcement. So you sign up for your AP exams in the fall, and you should sign up if you're enrolled in the course. You're scored on a 1 to 5 scale. 3 and higher is considered passing. And then each college or university uses AP scores differently. Now, this is a great question to ask if you are planning on taking one or more APs in high school and you are sitting in on these college visits that we're hosting over, I think we're at like 200 plus at this point. But if you have a school that you're interested in, you could ask that during the rep visit and see, and you'll hear a big variety of answers, such as, yes, a score of 3 or higher will count towards your bachelor's degree. So you could actually be earning college credits for an AP score. Some schools will say, we'll use it for placement in higher courses. So instead of needing to take an introductory level biology class, you could be taking a higher level biology class in college because you scored a 3 or higher in your high school AP exam. It could be used to fulfill a requirement. Let's say you take AP Spanish language and you score a 3 or higher. Maybe the college says, great, you've fulfilled the world language requirement for your bachelor's degree. You can take a different elective course instead. And then it can also be used for admission purposes. So schools are always saying that they're looking at your overall rigor and where you've chosen to challenge yourself. And so it will help you get admitted to the college or university, but that no other quote unquote credit will be given. So you aren't placed higher in a course and you're not given college credit, but it did help you in the admissions process. And also on here, some schools will say it has to be a 4 or a 5. So 3 is passing, but some schools want a different number. Is there a question? Okay, great. All right, subject tests. Okay, subject tests are intended to highlight your strengths in specific subject areas. Colleges can sometimes use these to see what interest or intended path of study you're looking to pursue. These tests are administered several times during each school year, but they often overlap with the regular SAT. So you do need to do some calendaring, some planning on when you would take either like the SAT or the ACT, and then when you would take subject tests if you're going to take a subject test. So a little bit more on the nuts and bolts of these. They're multiple choice. Foreign language tests do contain a listening portion, and they're 1 hour long, and they're scored on a scale from 200 to 800. And you typically take it at the completion of the related course. So for the Math 2 subject test, you would take it after completing your pre-calculus course. And let's just say you didn't do as well as you wanted. You could do some additional studying over the summer, and then you could retest in the fall, but you just need to check what dates it's being offered. And again, right now, there are no tests being offered for the SAT or the ACT in our local area. And so students are also not able to take subject tests this fall if they want to increase their score, and they were able to, actually no one was able to take them in the spring really either. So this is just an interesting year, but we want to make sure we cover sort of what these things are and when they normally happen. Okay, before I actually, I'll go here. So there's a lot of words being thrown around: test optional, test blind, test flexible, and it can mean something different at each school. Test optional at some places means truly like it is completely up to the student and there's no impact whatsoever if you do or do not submit a test score. And I think the general rule of thumb is colleges do not want you to submit a test unless you're in the average, you've scored like sort of in the middle of the people who've submitted scores in the past. So you can look at the freshmen who have been admitted in the past and see the average test scores. And if your test scores are outside of that range, you're on the lower side of the range, the reps have been saying, do not send your test scores. They would prefer to evaluate you without the test scores. But if you are in that range and you're really happy with your score and you feel like it accurately represents you, then it is truly your choice if you want to submit it or not. So that's the way to think about test optional. Test blind means even if you submit your test scores, it will not be used in the admissions component. It might be used for data purposes, and it might be published later when they're looking at a freshman admitted class, but it won't have any impact on your admissions. And then test flexible, which has been used a couple times. If you were sitting in the Purdue was calling it test flexible. So they were saying that it's, if you have test scores, they want you to submit them, but they understand that a lot of people have not been able to take tests. And so they've created this test flexible policy. But I would say same thing. If you are scoring outside of that range, you have to really decide if you're going to submit the scores or not. Okay, let me go back really quickly and just sit here. The idea of calendaring. So maybe if you can, again, this is not really for seniors, but for younger students that are in the room. In a traditional year, you would need to plan when you're taking these different tests and start thinking about how that's all going to come together. So if you're in an AP class, you know that May is happening. You can actually see the date that it's going to be offered, so you can check that out. And then you can think, when is the soonest that I would be prepared to take an ACT or an SAT if it's available? And for some students, it happens in December of junior year. who takes it then? Students who are maybe in a higher level math course or in a higher level English course and feel ready to take that test in December to get a score and have that practice. But a majority of students wait until the spring of junior year to take it for the first time. So it's really up to you again and your family. And you can always talk to Ms. Yazdani or me or the college counselor at your schools and say, you know, based on this, that, and the other, what do you think my testing timeline might look like? And then come up with that plan. And then you'll want to see, when would you possibly retake the test? It is not encouraged to take tests back to back because it doesn't give you enough time to actually study, increase your scores, and make it kind of worth your while. So I would say don't schedule another test until you've actually had time to process your previous results, put in some prep work, and then make that retest count. But it might be that you choose to retest in June because you've got a lot of APs, or maybe you have something else going on around the time of one of the other testing administrations, and that's why you're picking a specific date. You might also pick a specific date because you have a plan for when you're going to take your subject tests or not. Oh, one more thing about subject tests is it very much relates to what school you're planning on applying to, if they encourage or even consider subject scores. The problem is you might not know your college list at the completion of the course that prepares you to take a subject test. So again, the general rule of thumb would be, if you're looking to go into highly selective or impacted majors like engineering, for example, it is probably in your best interest to plan on taking a subject test just so that you can keep all of the colleges on your college list open and that you're not unintentionally closing certain options because you haven't taken the test. Again, this is all 100% dependent on if these tests are available, and a lot of colleges are waiving these things because they know students don't have access. So again, that was me kind of talking in like a non-pandemic year and how it was before the pandemic. We don't know if it's going to shift permanently moving forward. Okay, so going to the online resources, both Mountain View and Los Altos have College and Career Center websites. There is so much information on these websites. And so we do encourage you to check these out, look and see what's on there, and ask us if you have questions. Next week, we are going to be talking about the UC Personal Insight questions. Ms. Yazdani is going to lead everyone in thinking about the PIQs, and it'll be great. So definitely show up for that. And then on October 7th, we'll have a conversation about application rounds. So early action, early decision, regular decision, what round do I apply in? What are the pros and cons? So we'll have a conversation about kind of placing those chess pieces when you're thinking about when to apply to certain schools. Okay, so that takes us to Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.